Have you ever been around someone who just drains you? Maybe it's a neighbor, a family member, or even an old friend. You get off the phone with them or leave a conversation, and you feel like your peace has been stolen. It's not that they shouted or slammed a door. It's more subtle than that. Maybe they made you feel small or guilty or like you had to prove yourself again and again. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. As we get older, we become more aware of our time and our energy and how precious both really are. At this stage in life, we don't need drama, manipulation, or relationships that leave us feeling worse instead of better. That's why today we're talking about something that can protect your well-being like nothing else can. How smart people treat toxic people. Now, when we say toxic people, it doesn't have to mean someone who's evil or malicious. It can simply be someone who repeatedly makes you feel uneasy, guilty, drained, or like you're walking on eggshells. And here's the key thing to remember. You don't have to fight with them, fix them, or even explain yourself. Smart people have learned another way, and that's what we're going to explore today. Imagine this. You're sitting at your kitchen table, enjoying your morning coffee, reading the paper, and the phone rings. It's someone who always manages to turn a 5-minute call into a 40-minute guilt trip. Maybe they make little digs about how you never call, or how you're so lucky compared to their tough life. You hang up, and your coffee doesn't even taste good anymore. That heaviness, that subtle tension, is a sign. And smart people pay attention to those signs. One of the first things smart people do when it comes to toxic behavior is this. They don't engage in the mud. They don't get pulled into the argument, the guilt, the manipulation. They stay calm. They stay grounded. I once watched a woman sit through a very tense conversation. Her friend across the table was getting loud and frustrated, arms waving, voice raised. But she just took a sip of her coffee, nodded, smiled politely, and then said, "I think I'm going to head out." No yelling, no insults, no long-winded explanations. Just peace. And that's the goal. You see, we're often taught that we have two options when people mistreat us: fight back or stay silent. But there's a third option, and it's the one that really works. Disengage. Not with anger, but with clarity. You don't have to attend every argument you're invited to. You don't have to justify your feelings to someone who's already made up their mind. And here's another thing smart people know. You can't change someone who doesn't want to change. Not with patience, not with kindness, and not with effort. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you wise. Because the truth is, the more you try to explain yourself to someone who thrives on misunderstanding you, the more exhausted you'll feel. Think back to a time when you were trying to make peace with someone who always found a way to turn things around on you. Maybe you apologized, even when you didn't do anything wrong. Maybe you thought, if I just say it the right way, they'll understand. But no matter what you said, it was never enough. That cycle? That's how toxic patterns keep going. And those patterns, they start small. A joke at your expense. A comment that makes you second-guess yourself. A sorry that always comes with a but. I'm sorry, but you're too sensitive. I'm sorry, but if you hadn't said that, I wouldn't have reacted that way. And you start wondering, maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe it is my fault. But no, that's the pattern. That's how it starts. And smart people, they recognize it before it grows. It's like a vine. It doesn't strangle you all at once. It wraps around slowly, gently, until one day you wake up and realize it's hard to breathe. That's why it's so important to listen, not just to what people say, but how they make you feel. Because while words can lie, your body rarely does. If you feel tired, tense, or anxious after being around someone, pay attention. That's not random. That's your inner wisdom speaking. Smart people trust that feeling. They don't gaslight themselves into staying in places where they feel small or wrong all the time. And they don't make excuses for bad behavior, even if it comes from someone they love. They look at the pattern and ask, is this good for me? Is this helping me grow, or is it wearing me down? Let me tell you something that took me years to learn. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. Being kind is beautiful. But being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. You can care about someone and still walk away from a toxic conversation. You can have compassion and still say, "That doesn't work for me." And yes, I know, it's not always easy. Especially if you were raised to keep the peace, to be polite, to avoid conflict. You might feel guilty the first time you say, "No, I can't talk right now." Or the first time you decide not to call someone back right away because you need space. But here's the truth. The only people who get angry about your boundaries are the ones who benefited from you not having any. Let that sink in. Healthy people respect boundaries. They might not always understand them at first, but they don't punish you for setting them. Toxic people, though, they'll push back. They'll argue, guilt trip, twist your words, make you feel like you're the problem. And that's where smart people make the biggest difference. They don't take the bait. They don't get pulled into long debates about why they need to take care of themselves. They don't hand over a presentation to justify why they need space. They say it once, kindly and clearly, and then they follow through. "I'm not comfortable with that conversation. I won't be joining that event. I need some quiet time right now." Simple, calm, final. And when the other person pushes, because toxic people always push, smart people don't yell. They don't defend. They don't try to win. They just repeat the boundary and walk away if they have to. Because they've learned that peace is more valuable than being understood by someone who doesn't really want to understand. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't shouting louder or trying harder. It's stepping back. It's choosing silence. It's choosing you. Because you've lived long enough to know this. Your time is too short and your peace is too precious to waste on someone who makes you feel small. You start to notice the difference right away. The heaviness in your chest begins to lift. You wake up without that knot in your stomach. Even little things like taking a walk or sitting quietly with your thoughts feel lighter. That's what happens when you stop carrying what was never yours to begin with. Because here's the truth, most people never say out loud, it's not your job to fix other people's behavior. It's your job to protect your own peace. That shift, from trying to manage other people to simply managing your own boundaries, that's where the real freedom begins. And smart people, they live in that freedom. They don't chase apologies. They don't wait for someone to suddenly become self-aware. They see the signs early, and instead of asking, "What did I do wrong?" they ask, "Is this relationship healthy for me?" Let me share something that might resonate with you. There was a woman I knew. Let's call her Carol. She was in her early 70s, sharp as a tack, heart as big as the ocean. But for years she kept going back and forth with her grown daughter. Every time they talked, it ended in tears. Her daughter blamed her for everything, twisted her words, and constantly made her feel like she was failing as a mother. And Carol, being the loving woman she was, kept trying to fix it. She'd apologize, she'd explain, she'd cry. And it never changed. One day she said to me, "I realized I wasn't actually in a relationship. I was in a guilt trap." And that was the day she stopped trying to win her daughter's approval and started reclaiming her peace. She didn't stop loving her. She just stopped letting herself be torn down. She said no more conversations that ended in tears. No more apologizing for the same things over and over. No more being available just to be hurt again. That's the kind of strength we're talking about. Not coldness. Not shutting people out. Just deciding that being kind to others shouldn't mean being unkind to yourself. Because toxic people don't always come in like storms. Sometimes they come as slow leaks. A little energy here, a little peace there, and before you know it, you're worn out. But smart people patch the leaks early. They don't need a big blow-up to tell them something's wrong. They trust how they feel. Have you ever walked away from someone and felt a deep sigh of relief in your chest? That's not coincidence. That's clarity. That's your spirit telling you, that wasn't good for me. Smart people listen to that voice. And more importantly, they act on it. They stop explaining themselves to people who are committed to misunderstanding them. That's a big one. Because toxic people don't argue to understand. They argue to confuse, to twist, to make you doubt yourself just enough to stay stuck. And once you're in that loop, it can feel impossible to get out. But the escape hatch has always been there. Stop explaining. Just stop. It's tempting, especially when you're someone who values fairness, to want to make things right. To say, if I can just help them see my side, maybe we can move forward. But the truth is, if someone wanted to see your side, they already would. And smart people don't argue with someone whose goal is control, not connection. Instead, they use silence as their shield. Not the cold kind of silence meant to punish, but the wise kind of silence that says, I'm not going to waste any more of my breath on this. Because you don't have to attend every fight you're invited to. You don't have to hand over your peace just to prove you're a good person. Smart people also stop trying to win. That's a tough one, especially for folks who grew up believing that if you just tried hard enough, loved hard enough, explained well enough, things would get better. But toxic relationships don't work like that. They feed on your effort. The more you give, the more they take. The moment you pull back and protect your space, the manipulation starts. You've changed, they say. Or, so now you're just giving up? But here's what smart people understand. When someone says, you've changed, what they really mean is, you stopped letting me walk all over you. That's not failure. That's growth. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Not with bitterness. Not with anger. But with peace. The kind of peace that says, I don't have to participate in this anymore. Let me tell you something powerful. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. They don't keep everyone out. They decide who gets to come in and on what terms. And when you've lived a full life, raised families, worked hard, overcome grief and change, you've earned the right to decide who gets access to your energy. Not everyone should have a key to your peace. That's not selfish. That's smart. Now, setting boundaries doesn't mean people will like it. In fact, the ones who benefit from your silence, your compliance, your guilt, they'll probably push back the hardest. They'll say you're cold, or rude, or difficult. But remember this, the only people who get upset about your boundaries are the ones who benefited from you not having any. And here's the beautiful part. Once you get through the discomfort, once you learn to hold your ground without shame, you find something priceless. Your self-respect. That feeling of standing tall, even when someone tries to tear you down. That quiet confidence that says, I know who I am, and I don't need anyone else's approval to feel whole. Because smart people don't let others define them. They don't shrink themselves to fit into someone else's version of who they should be. They've learned, sometimes the hard way, that peace at the expense of your self-worth isn't peace at all. It's self-abandonment. And they're not willing to trade themselves just to keep someone else comfortable. So, if you've ever felt like you're too much, too sensitive, too emotional, let me say this clearly, you're not too much. You're just around people who want you to be less so they can feel more in control. And smart people, they don't buy into that anymore. They don't apologize for taking up space, for having boundaries, for saying no. They honor their own needs, even if it makes others uncomfortable. Because at this stage of life, they know what really matters. Peace, health, joy. And that's something worth protecting, with clear words, calm exits, and a deep trust in their own worth. That inner trust, that quiet voice inside you that says, I matter. It grows stronger the more you use it. At first, it might feel strange, especially if you've spent years putting everyone else first. If you're the one who always smoothed things over, said yes when you meant no, or stayed quiet just to keep the peace, then choosing yourself might feel selfish at first. But over time, it starts to feel like coming home. Because here's what smart people learn through experience. Loving people doesn't mean losing yourself. You can care deeply for someone and still not allow them to mistreat you. You can forgive someone and still decide not to let them back into your space. Forgiveness is about releasing the weight, but boundaries are about protecting what's sacred. And your peace is sacred. There's something powerful about realizing you no longer need someone else's validation to feel good about who you are. That realization often comes slowly after a lot of painful lessons. But once you have it, you become unshakable. You stop chasing approval. You stop needing permission to say no. And most of all, you stop tying your self-worth to people who never really saw you clearly in the first place. Toxic people are often very good at making you feel like you're the problem. It's their greatest trick. One small comment here, one passive-aggressive jab there. Maybe they tell you you're too emotional, or that no one else sees it that way. Over time, it can chip away at your confidence. You begin second-guessing yourself. And that's exactly where they want you. Unsure, dependent, off balance. But smart people, they catch the pattern. They see how the game is played. And when they recognize that someone keeps making them feel small, they stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "Why am I allowing this in my life?" That's the turning point. Once you hit that moment of clarity, you start to take your power back. It's not about shouting or cutting people off in a burst of anger. It's about making small, consistent choices that protect your spirit. You answer the phone less. You let a text go unanswered when you know it'll only lead to conflict. You limit the time you spend with people who leave you feeling drained. And eventually, you realize that peace feels better than pleasing everyone. And I'll tell you something that many people don't talk about. Sometimes the most toxic voice is the one in your own head. That inner critic that repeats what others once said to you. You're not good enough. You're too needy. You should just let it go. But smart people learn to challenge that voice. They talk back to it. They say, "No, I deserve respect. I deserve peace. I don't have to justify my feelings to anyone." That takes time. It takes practice. But it's possible. And it's worth it. Because the more you respect yourself, the more your world begins to reflect that. The way people treat you changes. The conversations you allow shift. And most importantly, the way you treat yourself becomes softer, kinder, more loving. You stop tearing yourself apart over things you can't control. You stop trying to earn love that should have been given freely. You stop bending until you break just to keep someone else comfortable. And yes, sometimes that means people will walk away, or you'll walk away from them. And that can feel lonely, especially at first. But there's a big difference between being alone and being at peace. Smart people understand that solitude can be healing. It gives you room to breathe, to listen to yourself, to remember who you were before someone convinced you that you weren't enough. Eventually, you begin to fill that space with better things. Kinder voices, healthier relationships, people who don't just take, they also give. People who don't make you feel small, they remind you of your worth. And those relationships, they don't need drama to survive. They don't require constant apologies, or walking on eggshells, or hiding parts of yourself. They're safe. They're easy. They're peaceful. And that's what you deserve. Especially now. You've lived long enough to know what matters. You've faced your share of heartache, disappointment, and change. You've learned that you can't control everything, but you can control what you allow into your life. And that's no small thing. That's power. So if someone keeps hurting you, belittling you, or draining you, don't waste your time trying to make them see it. Don't offer up your heart just to have it stepped on again. Don't keep knocking on a door that only opens when it's convenient for them. Instead, turn around. Walk toward the door that leads to peace, to joy, to the version of you that knows your worth and protects it with quiet strength. And if guilt creeps in, and it might, remember this. Choosing yourself is not a betrayal. It's a beginning. It's you finally saying, I matter. My feelings matter. My peace matters. And anyone who truly loves you will understand that. So today, I want to encourage you to pause and take stock. Think about the people in your life. Think about how you feel after a conversation. Energized? Respected? Or anxious and unsure? Let that be your compass. Let your peace be the standard. You're not too old to start setting boundaries. You're not too late to protect your peace. In fact, you're right on time. Because now is the perfect moment to live with intention, with clarity, and with freedom from the people and patterns that no longer serve you. If this message resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe you've had to set some tough boundaries in your own life, or maybe you're just beginning to realize that it's time. Either way, I invite you to share in the comments below. Your story might just be the encouragement someone else needs. And if you found this video helpful, please take a moment to like it and subscribe to Strong Elderly Life. We're building a community of strong, thoughtful, wise people, just like you, who are choosing peace, purpose, and power in this season of life. Here's to living with clarity. Here's to walking in peace. And here's to living your best life at any age.